All right, we just finished talking about the different types of products, the brand alternatives that retailers can bring into their retail establishment. So after a retailer has decided the appropriate mix of national brand and store brand products that they're going to carry, they actually have to buy it. They have to acquire it. And so that's what we're going to talk about here. We're going to talk about how we buy. First, we're going to talk about how we buy national brand merchandise, and then we're going to get into how we source store brand merchandise. So there are really two venues to meet national brand vendors and purchase national brand products. The first venue is a wholesale market. Now, a wholesale market for retail buyers is a concentration of vendors within a specific geographic location. Wholesale markets generally have permanent vendor showrooms that retailers can visit throughout the year. So it's almost like a mall for retail buyers. So you can walk into a wholesale market and each vendor, each manufacturer has a permanent space in there, which is set up like a store where retailers can look at and view the latest merchandise to determine whether or not they want to carry it in their stores and purchase it. Wholesale markets generally host market weeks, and a market week is a time during which buyers make an appointment to visit various vendor showrooms. So there might be a apparel market week, or a accessories market week, or a home goods market week, where the vendors are really concentrated around one specific category or department of merchandise. So vendors that don't have permanent space in a wholesale market can often rent space. They can rent space for one of these market weeks so that they're there just during the time that they think they would make the most sales. The Garment District in New York is the biggest warehouse wholesale market in the United States, but there are plenty of wholesale markets in London, Paris, Tokyo, Milan. The United States actually has another one, pretty big wholesale market right in Atlanta called America's Market. America's Mart is in Atlanta, and they are a wholesale market for retailers to go and purchase merchandise. And they are open year round, and they do host market weeks. And we're actually going to watch a video real quick, kind of about how the America's Mart in Atlanta operates and what the advantages are for retailers. If I can bear with me while I get this pulled up here. So that was just a little video on how a wholesale market works. The second type of venue where you can purchase national merchandise would be a trade show. A trade show is similar to a wholesale market where buyers can see the latest products and interact with vendors selling national products. The difference is that trade shows are a very temporary space. Vendors often display their merchandise in designated areas and will have sales representatives available, and these are normally done in conference halls or convention centers, and so vendors just have a temporary booth where they show their products and have their sales reps. So a lot of times companies will bring in company executives or celebrities to meet with potential merchandise buyers to help sell their products. A lot of times vendors will use games. They'll give away samples. They'll try to make this event very fun, very exciting, and very memorable for merchandise buyers so that those retailers, those retail buyers either make a purchase at the event or they can remember that vendor when they go back to their office and start making purchasing decisions. So trade shows happen in large convention centers around the United States. It's kind of a fun fact. The most common places to hold convention centers are in Las Vegas and Orlando. Las Vegas and Orlando have the space to hold very large conferences, very large trade shows to bring in millions of people to each trade show. But pretty much every large city has a convention center. We have one in Atlanta. There's large ones in Chicago. Most cities, even very small cities, have a small convention center where regional trade shows can be held for vendors to look at and buy national brand merchandise. When you're buying national merchandise and you're buying fashion merchandise, it usually happens 5 or 6 times a year, and this fluctuates with the seasonality of your products. But generally, if you are a buyer for a fashion merchandise category for a retailer who sells fashion merchandise, you're going to be going to these wholesale markets or trade shows 5 or 6 times a year to purchase merchandise. And generally, you're doing that many months before delivery. So if you remember what we talked about in Chapter 12, generally orders happen 3 or 4 months before the fashion merchandise arrives in the store. And so you have to attend these wholesale markets and attend these trade shows 5 or 6 times a year. And that's generally happening 4 or 5 months before the season happens when you actually want the merchandise in your store. Now, with staple merchandise, it's pretty easy because the ordering process is automatic and you use that continuous replenishment, but you still do visit these generally more trade show for staple merchandise, but they do have staple merchandise items at wholesale markets. And so generally you attend these a couple times a year, maybe even once a year, just to see what's new in the category and what products are available to you. So at these wholesale markets and at these trade shows, what are the steps you go through? Well, the first thing you're going to do is meet with your vendor. And oftentimes, buyers will make appointments with their key vendors at the wholesale markets or at the trade shows to make sure that they do have very specific times to discuss and interact with the representatives from the vendor. And a lot of times the buyer will actually be able to interact with the merchandise that's coming up for the next season or the next year. And so you'll really discuss the performance of that current merchandise and review upcoming merchandise. Occasionally, buyers will actually place orders at the trade show. Now, something to keep in mind is that prices are not negotiated at markets or shows. Very rarely are prices negotiated between the vendor and the buyer. And so you have to be ready to pay the prices that the vendor is wanting for that product if you want to buy it in advance and make sure you get it. Now, sometimes buyers will return back to their home office and then they'll set up additional appointments with the vendor outside of the wholesale market or outside of the trade show to negotiate pricing to try to get the best prices that they can for the products. And so that's really the process for buying national brand merchandise. So let's talk about next how we develop and how we source store brand merchandise. The process is very different. When we're developing store brands, a lot of times large retailers hire employees who specialize in identifying trends, designing, and doing product specification. And then these people work with the manufacturer to actually make the product. So this is when you have people in-house who do these things, identify their trends, select the manufacturers, and monitor and manage conditions and quality. A second option when you're developing and sourcing store brand merchandise is to hire a third-party company to take care of all of the store brand merchandise. There is a company called Mass Global Fashions. And what Mass Global Fashions, they are a business that sources, manufactures, and delivers store brand merchandise. And so Mass, one of their largest companies is L Brands. L Brands, if you don't know, owns Victoria's Secret and Bath & Body Works, among a few other retailers. And so L Brands outsources their store brand products, which is all of them, essentially, because you can only get those products at those stores. They work with Mass Global, who actually sources, manufactures, and delivers all the merchandise for them. So they don't have people necessarily in-house identifying trends, and speccing the products. They actually hire a company who does all of the steps for them. A third option that retailers have is that they can source the merchandise from a manufacturer, and in this case, once a decision has been made about how much store brand merchandise will be acquired, the designers develop a complete specification plan, and they'll work with their sourcing department to find a manufacturer for the product. And in that case, the sourcing department at the company actually finds the manufacturer, and they'll negotiate a contract to produce the item, and they're also responsible for monitoring the production process. So this is generally a high-cost process. The retailer is responsible for the quality control, and then they actually have to monitor the production and make sure the quality is of the level that they want it to be. And often with this type of sourcing, there's a very long lead time. And so especially because a lot of manufacturing happens globally, that long lead time has to be taken into consideration when sourcing these products so that you can make sure that you have them in the store when you need them in the store. So this lecture talked us through how to actually acquire national brand merchandise and how to source store brand merchandise. When we come back in the next lecture, we are going to talk about negotiation, and we're also going to talk about some legal and ethical issues that we find in merchandising.